Today's video is all about work. It's about what I learned in a really positive environment like the in-house design department at Target, and what I've seen in really toxic environments where there's a super low level of trust. And depending on where this edit ends up, there may or may not be a chunk of creative hacks. We'll see. You have to watch it and find out. Despite my aversion to corporate hierarchies and politics, one of the best places that I worked at was Target. And the thing that was great about Target was the responsibilities were really clearly delineated, and everybody seemed to have respect for everyone else's area of expertise. So your client would come to you with a project, they'd have a brief, they knew what they needed or what they were after, and they'd bring that to you, and then you'd go off and do your work. And if you met the needs of the brief, there were approvals. You trusted the marketing person to know what piece needed to be made, and the marketing person trusted you to know what that piece should look like and say. If they were going to reject something, it was going to be because there was an actual issue. They didn't just reject stuff so that they could make tweaky changes to it, which is really common, especially in places where there's no boundaries between departments and politics are kind of ruling the day. There was a really clear delineation of roles, and that's a very important factor, because then the different teams are actually partners. They're not in these weird client relationships that end up being just the shittiest client relationships ever. When you don't have that respect for each other, then whoever's asking for the project isn't your partner, they're your client, but they're just like the shittiest client that you can't fire. At Target, the clients that I had were great. I think it was the culture of Target, was the expectation that the person you were dealing with was the right person for the job, and you needed to make sure you were responsible for your part of the job. And so your part of the job might just be deciding that this team needs a new badge, or that we need a sign for a specific context, or that we need product for the gift shop, whatever it was. And then you went to the team that was appropriate to make that, and you let them do their thing. There was still some dumb stuff, as there always is, but in general, the overall machine worked really well. And what I actually think is interesting is that inefficiencies or toxicity was reserved for individual teams. So because the teams had boundaries and were clearly defined, if there were issues, it was within the team, which is way different than the issues spreading from team to team, because the overall culture has too much bleed through and is messy and is kind of defined by politics. One of the reasons I'm so gung-ho about stuff like workflow and project management is that I have seen how in an environment, especially in a lot of kind of low trust environments, that lack of proper project management and workflow really toxifies the environment worse. So for example, let's say you're working somewhere, things are supposedly being proofed, but every time you send something out to print, it gets actually printed and then needs to be reprinted because your teammates, your colleagues, or whoever isn't properly proofing stuff and doing their due diligence. So every time you do something, it has to be reprinted. After the 4th time, you probably don't have a lot of faith in those people whatsoever, and your attitude is going to naturally flow to a kind of fuck it attitude. You'll definitely get to a point where you realize it's not worth your time and effort to do a good job overall. So you'll just do as good as can be expected within the environment. And this is made worse, I think, if there's a general lack of accountability and lack of hierarchy. People talk about hierarchy as if it's necessarily this bad thing, but most of the really screwed up places that I've worked, there isn't clear hierarchy. And I think toxicity, it thrives in ambiguity. It grows on ambiguity. If you work in a place and it's unclear who gets to actually make a decision on something, you're going to end up with these constant power battles and these constant, like, people all trying to find someone whose job title actually puts them in charge of something in order to help get a decision made. But then the odds are really good that if it's ambiguous further down the chain, it's going to be ambiguous up at the top. This kind of stuff, it flows down from the people who are setting the policies. It shouldn't be surprising that if there is a lack of clear-cut guards, there's a lack of understanding, like, who's responsible for what. Then when you get into that, you get this kind of messy stuff, you get this fuck it attitude, you get the antagonistic relationships between people, where it's not that they dislike each other, it's that nobody knows who's responsible for what. And if things happen in a sequence, it's real easy to just make sure that whoever's the next person down the line, you just treat them like they have no responsibility. You know, if you want to have a recipe for a toxic workplace, just make sure that nobody appears to have any autonomy and that no one appears to be able to make a decision. And then from there, all you have to do is you can just let the political types scheme to get themselves in a position where they can get the things they want, and you can let the very kind of work-oriented people fester as they struggle to make sense of why everything is shitty and why no one seems concerned with doing work in a way that makes sense, doing work in a way that doesn't repeat the mistakes of the past. And it definitely starts at the top. That sets the pace. If it's toxic at the bottom and pervasive, the person at the top is to blame, because they're doing something to cause that, and presumably they're having relationships that make that happen. One of the worst habits that I have is I give people too much credit when I haven't seen any evidence that they know what they're doing. So I tend to be overly reasonable and conscientious. And one of the things that makes me do is I might look at a situation like someone is hired to be director of such and such. And I assume that the reason that they're director of such and such is because they have this proven track record for doing good work. Most people are not hired to do effective work. They're human beings hired by other human beings. And in general, human beings make all kinds of terrible decisions for all sorts of reasons. So I'll give someone all this credit, like a thing will happen or a situation, and I'll think like, this is obviously a dumb marketing tactic in 2019. Why aren't we addressing this, like the experience? And then I'll assume that because this person has director in their title and their last job was fancy, I'll assume that they know what they're doing and that they know something I don't know. And you can assume that once or twice, but once you watch, for example, like 9 months of backwards stupidity, you got to go, oh, you got this title because you're one of those people whose primary skill is politicking, and the last thing on your resume was a big deal, so you managed to parlay that into a bigger deal. There's no evidence that you know what the hell you're doing. This has been a super frustrating day. I finished this video that is rendering out of iMovie right now on my phone, and it's got some clips from a lecture. I just wanted to get it on my desktop so I could throw those slides in. I go to sync to image capture and I get this crazy error. I then deduce that it has something to do with it. There's just too much stuff on my phone. So I like clear off everything I can, and I'm literally doing this thing where like I'm gonna get like 2 to 3 20 megabyte files into image capture at a time. Finally, when my work is done, I'm like, all right, let's try restarting this. I restart it and it's a breeze, but in that time, my phone went from having 2,000 images and videos on it down to 200. So I put in a lot of effort, and now it is 6:30. It is amazingly gross out. I stepped outside and my glass is fogged up. It is so hot and disgusting. So, whatever. Something about that makes this day kind of funny though. By the time you see this, episode 86 is out, and episode 86 is the first of these more collage-y mixtape type vlogs, which I hope that you dig. I'm pretty excited about them. I kind of feel like it's a thing I've wanted to do anyway. There's something I don't like about this sort of Instagram story approach to documentation. It feels like too much to constantly have to like pull the phone out and have all of the kind of stars aligned. I like the idea of the phone in the car is almost like this surveillance camera that I'm aware of, and that I feel like it lets it be a little bit more natural, which is, I feel like a kind of a key critical thing for me and my nerdiness. What I want to talk about continues from the hierarchy stuff in yesterday's vlog. So there's a confluence of things that I'm thinking about right now.
I don't consider myself, hold on, I should wait until I'm talking.
I don't consider myself to be an especially creative designer. I made a video a while back about how I use gamification in my design process. And I think it's a really important thing because I am not the kind of designer that is a free spirit. The thing that I've realized is that like in everything I do, I have systems and parameters around it, kind of like rules for engagement. I use the gamification to make work that is more formal or more inherently visual than I would do on my own. I suppose that there's a real likelihood that all the work that the MVA has done that I love the most, what I probably love the most about it was that I ended in spots I didn't anticipate, and I made things that we got somewhere different, somewhere I wasn't expecting to go. We did things that I wouldn't ordinarily do. You know, if I was just handed copy and opening up something, it's just going to end up being this all caps black and white. I'm just so attracted to that very basic problem. But I've always had this vision of a graphic designer as this person who masters these visual languages and then can execute across a wide range of them. In general, I no longer hold that vision of graphic designers, but I do hold that ideal for myself of I want to be unpredictable. That overarching idea of style and unpredictability is, I think it's still something I hold on to. And it's funny because it's not like I approach projects where I'm trying to find the answer for the problem. Like, that's absolutely not it. I seem to have gotten into this thing where if my vision of the designer with the like multiple styles or whatever, it was like they're gonna do this kind of project differently than this kind of project, and they're gonna come up with a custom thing for each one. And I seem to be at this thing now where it's like the design presentation is 5 custom things, some of which are at odds with each other. So to me, it's no longer, or it's never about finding that's the idea. It's more like, what are all the ideas? Our earlier work did not have any of this happening. Yeah, we were traditional graphic designers. I think we were somewhat like anti-ideological. In general, we just liked stuff kind of stripped down and really typographic, which is whatever, super generic, and who gives a shit. But then when I had this kind of crisis about my process, and we introduced bednote diagrams and sketching, and then saw that using the bednote diagrams with like mood boards or material boards, that I was getting to places that I wouldn't have gotten to using my normal brain and my normal process. Then I got really excited about how systems can make work creative. So a bednote diagram is a system, and it takes your boring ideas and makes them interesting. Or it takes your normal kind of ideas that you have, but then you use the bednote diagram to marry that against formal expression of that idea. So maybe style. And then all of a sudden, you're getting outside of your instincts. What I've tried to do is implement them in a way where they work for me and they work for actual commercial practice. That's a critical condition. Stuff that helps you become more than who you are is pretty fantastic. And what's ended up happening is that the principle of the bednote diagram applies again and again. The idea of unexpected options or whatever. So, that could be you're doing typographic studies. You hit something you like. Instead of saying, oh, okay, I figured it out, and then you tweak it until you like it even more, I think, oh, let's make 5 copies of this and start randomly changing the fonts. Or you have a layout of typography and a photo, and you think like, oh, all right, cool. Let's take this type, put it on a master page, and then put it over a bazillion photos, put it over 100 photos. In one context originally, it may have had a really strict formal idea, but it might get more interesting as its logic gets lost. Essentially what I do is I'm a very, very rational designer. So I attempt to undermine that through systems. The goal is always this idea of getting out of being me, as weird as that is to say. Because when I see other people's work, I want to be surprised. And when I see my own work, I want to be surprised. So that's kind of the logic or the idea. And hopefully that's cooler than what the first part of this video is, which is about working with shitty people who don't give you enough responsibility. All right. If I have a project that is non-conceptual, that demands a kind of formal reaction to it, those projects have traditionally been a nightmare for me. They've been super hard to execute on, and they've been more stressful than they should have.